Hello everyone, my name is Loko and welcome to some more StarCraft 2 Legacy of the Void. Today we're going to be analyzing a game that I played recently versus a guy named Para on the unranked ladder in Legacy of the Void, because as of right now it is still beta and the ranked ladder is currently not available. Now Zerg vs Zerg is an interesting matchup. Zerg vs Zerg early game, now that the Ravager has been nerfed, as you may be aware in the recent patch notes, the Ravager did get nerfed pretty hard. All of a sudden, early game Zerg vs Zerg is back to the good old Zergling Baneling arrest. And some of you may hate that, some of you like it. I'm a little bit indifferent about it. And while I'm not particularly bad at the whole Zergling Baneling aggression, I feel like I'm pretty reasonable at it. It's just something that I've been playing for a very long time, and I really like the switch up that you could do with Roaches into Ravagers into Zerglings and all these little tiny aggressions that opened up. But I guess that is gonna be a thing for the past, at least for the time being. So Zerg vs Zerg early game is all about the all about the Zerglings and the Banelings again. Now, in the middle part of the game is where the game really opens up. Obviously, you can still go for Roaches and you can still go for Mutalisks. Those are like very common options and very, very powerful options. But on top of that, there are a couple of cool switches you can make. Mutalisks basically always are gonna be on a timer. So if you see anyone go for Mutalisk, they will be switching into Roaches or something else, for the simple fact that Mutalisk will get hard countered as soon as Vipers come out. And obviously a big Roach Hydra ball will get countered by Lurkers. So there's kind of cool dynamics that got added into a matchup that was already pretty interesting. And everything combined, even now that it's still the beginning of the beta, everything combined, it does give you a very well-rounded matchup where a lot of different, a lot of different builds and a lot of different openers are completely viable, and there's no set meta yet. Now, in this specific game, as you may have already guessed, I am gonna go for a Nydus worm as a response to my opponent's Mutalisk. We are gonna have a relatively normal early game right now with some Zerglings and some Banelings. Actually, I believe I open up with a gasless build, so the good old gasless build is completely viable once again as well. I'm basically just playing a standard game. My opponent is playing a pretty standard game as well. And while I decide to transition towards Roaches, he decides to transition towards Mutalisk and then into Roaches and Hydras to counter my specific army. Now, there's a couple of cool things that you can do. First off, let's go really quickly over the Nydus worm changes and the reason why I do decide to go for a Nydus worm. In Heart of the Swarm, a queen follow-up after you scouted that your opponent was gonna go for Mutalisk was one of the better follow-ups you could do, not gonna lie. Basically, the idea behind it is that if you get Mutalisk against you, you're gonna either have to tech up to Hydralisk, which is gonna take a little bit long, or you're gonna tech up to Infestors, at which point you're gonna need a couple in order to actually change fungal properly. And you know, if you're gonna also plan on putting down these infested Terrans, obviously you need to micro even harder for the simple fact that else you will just get picked off once again. So originally, people were all countering Mutalisk play with Hydralisk and Infestors. Now, over time, people sort of started realizing that, hey, queens are really good. Like, if I make like 1 or 2 spores in each base and I make a queen, I will be in a lovely position, and then I don't need to be too scared either, because, you know, I don't need to worry too much about it. I'll just sit back, make a couple queens, eventually get a Hydra den out as well, put out some Hydras, and maybe eventually an Infestation Pit as well. And all of a sudden, people started dealing with these kind of queens, and with these kind of Mutalisk openers just fine. Now, in Heart of the Swarm, it is much more common for people to stay on Mutalisk tech, right? Like, you can actually go from Mutas and then very quickly tech up to Ultralisk and get those out really early on. And all of a sudden, a Mutalisk switch sort of like turns into a massive Mutalisk stay, I guess you can say, where people just sort of stay at that tech. That is much more common. So what people would try and pull off is make like 8 or so queens, add on a couple Hydras, put down a Nydus, and maybe on this map, for example, put it here in the corner of the main base, hope the opponent doesn't scout it, get all of the queens out, and then obviously you will all of a sudden have those queens that are really, really good at defending versus Mutas in the main base. Now, what I was trying to point out right here is that Mutalisk are still a viable option, but Nydus networks got changed completely. So what does a Nydus worm exactly do if you're not aware of it? Basically, right now, a Nydus worm cannot be killed unless it's already spawned. So while it's spawning, in the past you could just simply grab a couple of drones or a couple of workers and just sort of attack move on the Nydus worm. Right now that is not going to be a viable option anymore. You need to wait for it to be deployed. Which means that if you put queens in first, they're going to pop out first. Which means you can start, and if you click fast enough, you can actually hit transfuse button really, really easily. So that is the introduction of this game. Basically what my opponent has been doing so far, he scouted exactly what was going on. I'm gonna go for a third base right now. Obviously, if I do want to play successful against a massive Muta Ling Bane ball, or maybe a switch towards Ultras or Roaches or whatever, I'm gonna need this third base, so I'm gonna try my very hardest to keep that one alive. As you may have noticed, this is just the super standard 2-base play that I advise pretty much everyone to play when you are first starting off with StarCraft 2. So if your question is, does it work at the higher levels? Yes, it definitely does. You can still play this strategy just fine. Now, the only thing to note right now about the positioning of my army is that I have relatively good vision of everything that is going on the map right now. So I feel comfortable to put my Roaches at the third base, which will eventually, at the very least likely, give me the option to defend against this third base harass. He is going to run a couple of Zerglings in. Please note, there are a couple of Roaches, or at least there were a couple of Roaches here on hold position to block any kind of potential Zergling aggression and run bys towards the natural. But right now, I know that it's going to be Mutalisks play. I am aware that there is at the very least a very big chance of it, and actually did I already see him? Yeah, I must have already spotted them right there. I'm putting down my Hydra Dents, I'm putting down a whole bunch of Spore Crawlers right away, and I should honestly start my Queen production right now as well. Now I'm a little bit low on minerals, and actually he killed a couple of my Overlords, so I'm currently supply blocked. So that's the reason why I'm not starting up any extra queens. But the extra Spore Crawlers are crucial here. Trying to move them over towards that third base. You can see I had like a 2-second like reaction speed right there that I could get away with. If I didn't, I would literally end up going down right now. Do have another transfuse available if I need to, but it looks like we're all good. So I'm starting a big round of drones right away. As you can see in the meantime, my opponent also is starting up the missile upgrade and a big round of drones for his base as well. So we are sort of like playing this cat and mouse game. He's trying to deny my third base. I managed to save my third base. He tries to outdrone me. I try and outdrone him. And it's like, it's a very like back and forth sort of strategy. Now, I know that my opponent has committed into this play right now, right? I am fully aware that my opponent makes Mutalisks and that he spent a lot of gas on it. With that comes the knowledge that he's not gonna have upgrades, or not nearly as strong of an upgrade as I do. I mean, who's gonna start +1/+1 missile upgrades when you're going for Muta Ling Bane at the beginning? Not very many people. So I know for a fact that I will, in 99% of the occasions, hit +1/+1 before him, as well as +2/+2 before him. And on top of that, I know he spent a lot of resources on a bunch of units that really only ended up killing a couple of Overlords. At this point, I feel pretty confident in my abilities to start adding on more queens. And whatever happens, I will be able to deal with it. If my opponent decides to be aggressive with more Mutalisk, I'm gonna add on more Hydralisk. If my opponent decides to be more aggressive with Roach Hydra, I will obviously also be able to counter that. So I'm just sort of trying to have everything set up together, have a couple of extra queens ready to go as well that I can put in this Nydus worm so I can transfuse it and to potentially deal with the Mutalisk that he may be producing. And here's the idea. I want to try and Nydus and catch him off guard right now, but ideally I do want to wait for +2/+2. Now in this game I actually make the mistake. I don't wait for these upgrades to finish for some reason. Don't really know exactly why, but here we go. I'm gonna put one down right here, behind the natural, or you know, behind the mineral line in the natural, or very close to it, re-rallying all of my new units into that Nydus worm, and I'm gonna try and sort of get all of the units out. Now I want to see what is going on exactly in my opponent's base. If he has Roaches and Hydralisk, I can potentially set up a surround that I was talking about. So I am putting down a second Nydus worm just in case he does get this round, and right here I'm like, wait a second, those are slow Hydralisk. He is likely transitioning towards Lurkers. I know for a fact that these units are gonna be stuck behind the Roaches no matter what because of the movement speed. So the reinforcements right now come out of the second Nydus worm, and I managed to actually do a nice little surround right here with Nydus worms. My opponent got completely caught off guard. The aggressive play with the Hydras is definitely worth it. You obviously do still have the Mutalisk flying around as well. I believe I will eventually be able to clean this up. But at this point in time, obviously, I've been dealing a ridiculous amount of damage already. Reinforcing with a couple more Hydras in case it does turn out to be necessary. It's always scary reinforcing with Hydras for the reason that, you know, if your opponent has a big swell of Roaches or Zerglings or whatever, it's very difficult to kill him. But target firing down the Roach Worm for just a second right there, making sure that it does end up falling. And as long as I get rid of those Mutas, well, the two Mutas right now, I know for a fact that I'm going to be fine. More and more reinforcements coming in from the Nydus Worm, and the surround actually ended up killing most of his Hydras, near guaranteeing me the victory. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. And hopefully it gave you a little bit more insight in the current state of Zerg versus Zerg mid-game. It's a very, very cool matchup. I love playing it, but Nydus worms are definitely one of the best options to go for, especially if your opponent is going through this Mutalisks play, either if he's switching a little bit too greedy into Lurkers, like we saw in this game, or if he's switching into like more and more Mutas. Just add on more Hydras, add on more queens, and just kill the army anyway. As long as you get the queens across the map, you will pretty much always pick up the victory. But other than that, hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you haven't already, hit that like button. If you want to see more, hit that subscribe button as well, so you will be the very first one to get a notification when I upload another video. I want to thank you guys all for watching. Have an amazing day. Do not forget to smile, and I'll see you in the next one.